Geek Myths, a novel about life, love, and the pursuit of sonic screwdrivers. Available in paperback and Kindle edition from Amazon.
Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog Podcast. It's been an interesting week this week. Not particularly great in many respects. But it was also Whooverville. I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't pay tribute to two greats. Mr. Pickwood, the designer of, most of modern Doctor Who from the Christmas Carol onwards, 70-odd episodes. A fantastic way of seeing the world. I met him at the same Hoovers event that the people from Radio Free Skaro met him at. And of course I met the people from Radio Free Skaro. So it was kind of a joyous evening. And yes, he did work on some of my favourite stuff. And The Prisoner. Let's not discuss that. But let's face it, one of the good things about The Modern Prisoner was the look of it, which is what he was responsible for. A fantastic talent, greatly missed. And of course, if you've been listening to the TDP for long enough, you'll know that I keep doing the Summer of Blake 7, and I've reviewed practically every Big Finish version of Blake 7 going. I'm working my way steadily through all of Blake 7. Every summer, with the exception of the last one, I cover just a few episodes, and eventually we'll have every single one reviewed of TV Blake 7. And at its core, three main characters. You had Gareth Thomas's Blake, you had Avon, Paul Darrow, and Jacqueline Pearce, or her Servalan. If you get the chance, because Servalan died this week, I think 73 or 74, either way, greatly missed. Every single tribute on Twitter has said what an absolute incredible character she was. She was a massively underused actress. She could have been something wonderful. But you know what? To us, she was something wonderful. And she was ours. She was also tremendously filthy with that incredible laugh. For someone so attractive, she had no ego and was all ego and was just a force of nature. She will be greatly missed. I only met her once at Newcastle, and I asked her to sign my copy of Whostrology, which is where I tend to get all of my autographs put because they were all over the place. And she said she would, but she was a paid-for guest, and she was very apologetic, but I didn't mind paying. She was a paid-for guest. That's how these things work. So rather than buy a photograph, I bought her autobiography. A majorly good move. So she signed that, and she signed my copy of Whostrology. Now, if you're interested in her, and trust me, you will be, go away and listen to the Big Finish interview with her, where you get a condensed version of her biography. It's tremendously worth listening to. It's just hilarious. Perhaps some of the stories, a lot of the stories, aren't for the youngest of all listeners. But if you were a fan of Jacqueline Pearce, well, the chances are you're slightly more than 20 years old. And your ears won't be offended by such stories. So if you don't own that, go away and listen to that. But one of the good things from this week was Whooverville. In fact, it was brilliant. Apart from my tremendously good time signing copies of Geek Myths and shifting more copies than I thought I would, the best thing, as always, was the people, the strangers I was meeting. I got to meet some listeners to the Tin Dog Podcast, people I'd never met before, saying such nice things, truly. And it's nice to know that my enthusiasm transfers across in the things that I say. So thanks, Steve, for having me. Now, of course, Whooverville isn't just about meeting up with your friends and meeting new people. It's also about the guests. So this podcast is a little interview that I did with Paul Cornell and Liz. Liz from the Verity podcast and from the Hammer House of Horror, of which they're going to talk about now.
I'm David Warner and I'm listening to the Tin Dog podcast.
Hello, I'm Paul Cornell.
And would you like to introduce the person sitting to your left?
Oh, and this is Liz Myles, my co-host on Hammer House of Podcast, and also a little thing called Verity.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello. And also with me is...
Hi, Adam myself and Staggering Stories.
Right, see, we're all here, we're all at Whooverville, so we're all doing a bit of literal podcast. So we'll probably all end up appearing on each other's feeds, and we'll all be grateful for that. Now, you just mentioned the... now, I know you do Verity, and you've done... Well, you did the Paul Cornell thing for some time, and also you've both appeared on the Tin Dog podcast in the past. So we've got a bit of history. So, what are you doing now?
Sitting in a room in Derby. You stole my hilarious joke.
I thought better of it, honestly.
Likewise. In reference to the complete gag about Derby, A, how did you get here? Because it's a nightmare.
Practice.
One of us drove up in a little 2-hour casual drive, and one of us had 5 changes from the southwest of Scotland that had 10-minute gaps in between some of them, and some of the trains were 5 minutes late. So that was quite exciting.
From
and also
Cumbria.
What was that?
Cumbria.
I apologise to anyone in Coopershire listening to
Live
this.
podcasting is
I'm
not healthy for anyone.
so sorry about it. I don't know why I put up with this.
Right, so
is it real?
You're at other ends of the country talking at great length about Hammer films.
Yes.
Right, now, what have you done recently, Hammer film-wise? What was
What's the last one?
We just finished with guest James Goss. We recorded for our main stream The Hound of the Baskervilles, and then we did for our Patreon stream, just the two of us, we did Island of Terror.
Oh, lovely. Now, the big question, of course, will you be doing the most successful Hammer film of all time on the buses?
We've already done it.
We have already done on the buses.
Already done on the sea. My research failed horribly.
It was a patron
very
request.
kind and generous Patreon who later apologised to me for, due to my young, youthful, millennial age, making me watch on the buses.
Yeah, and of course you'll be doing holiday on the buses later.
No, there will be no more buses.
No more on the buses. I think we can all be grateful for that one.
Unless there's one with Peter Cushing in, I
In
don't
which
think
case,
there
that's
is.
absolutely fine.
Yes.
Yeah. From memory, there isn't. So you see.
Yes.
Although, to be fair, there's some guys upstairs with some Photoshop stuff going on that I'm sure they could knock something together for you if it really hasn't been nice. Failing that, just some sort of cardboard cutout of Peter Cushing wobbling past the back. Anyway, I'm rambling, and there's no one here to stop me.
Well, you say that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there are people here. Normally there's no one. Right, so you're doing the... How do you... I've got no idea, sorry. Bear with me. I'm used to editing myself out afterwards, and now that there's people here, I can't. I'm going to put my cases in front of you all. Right, so, what made you do Hammer?
Oh, well, do you want to tell a lie or shall I tell an accurate?
Why don't you do both?
You tell your accurate
The
version.
very accurate version was we were at the bar in Thought Bubble last year, and Paul decided to be extremely incorrect about Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, and I corrected him, and he maintained that being wrong was somehow actually right, and may have suggested that we do a podcast so that I can, in some months or years, make my point again, and then have a lovely audience who agrees with me. Thus, the moral high ground is mine somehow.
So basically, this whole podcast is a 4 or 5 year progression towards Liz finally going, and you see, I'm right.
Hey, I have to say, I thought, what was it? Oh, no, I've forgotten what film it was as well. This is really annoying. Yes, it did. Carry On Screaming. There was a brief discussion of this on Gallifrey Base.
Was there?
There
A
was.
brief discussion on Gallifrey Base.
It was in another thread about something. I've forgotten what it was, but you know who's starring at the Steptoe & dude? What's his name? Yes, and you were wrong about his performance in it. That's not me speaking. That was the four members. So I was like, oh yeah, should I say anything?
I don't want Gallifrey.
We don't all have time to look things up. What was your opinion of the performance?
I think it's all over the place. I think he's a great comedy actor in other circumstances, and he hasn't worked out what to do, and he varies every single take, every single moment in that movie. It's kind of...
That's one of the few without Sid James, isn't it?
Yes.
I think he's playing the Sid character.
He's kind of playing the sort of person character Sid would be, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've always assumed. I've always assumed Sid wasn't available, and they went, we like him.
Well, yeah, he's quite a catch for them, it must be said.
Yeah, and he's absolutely delightful, charming, and funny, and consistent in the role.
See, both of those points of view are consistent, apart from the word consistent, because you can still be lovely in the role, and I will be going home to watch the film in order to check my position on this.
Also, it's not as funny as it should be.
Oh my god! You're the one. This is a terrible film where I was lied to by Paul for some weeks beforehand. This is a great movie. I love this movie. I've got such many memories from childhood, and I was like, it's a carry-on movie. It's a carry-on movie. I hate carry-on movies. I watched it and I thought, oh my god, this is actually quite funny. This is a lovely pastiche of the movies that I love. These are good jokes.
Yes.
And then he comes on saying, it wasn't very good, was it? What?
This is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission meeting about carry-on screaming.
I just felt betrayed because it was like I was like, yes, I actually like this. It's going to be a lovely podcast where we're discussing how lovely and great, delightful, and funny a movie is, and you ruined it.
Often, what happens in a Hammer House of Podcast episode is that I will come to a movie. I will see the movie. I will come to the podcast going, oh, I don't know, I didn't like certain aspects, and she'll be, oh, what are you talking about? This was great, here's why it was great, and I'll be, oh, well, yeah, I kind of see what you mean, and I've sort of sold on it by the end. That's a shape we have quite often.
And helpful.
Yes.
So, how do you choose your next films? Is there a random thing?
Oh, no.
Just methodically,
We're methodically going through them.
We're watching, how does your introduction go?
I can't remember. I can barely remember what it's written down.
We were watching the Hammer horror movies in order, from the Quatermass Experiment to The Devil at Altar. And for the Patreon episodes, we are alternating between watching the Amicus Portmanteau movies in order and Patreon requests.
I was going to say, the Amicus ones are definitely my end of enjoyment.
And we're doing the British release order of Hammer movies. So the production order is a bit different.
That's completely my next question.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Because the pedantic amongst us really care about these things, and we shouldn't.
And also, we have long thoughts about what constitutes a Hammer horror movie, hence the Snorkel.
Right.
Not a horror movie.
But pleased we did it anyway. And we aren't doing the racist Britons abroad in history in fairly horrific situations movies like The Tour of the Tongs. Okay. Because honestly we just didn't want to do them.
What's the one I made you add?
You made me add The Damned.
Why did I do that?
Because people on Twitter kind of pressurised you into it.
They didn't pressure. They suggested it politely.
Yes.
People you've never met convincing you. It's how the world
There
works.
are lots of very nice people who like Peter Cushing, who also I therefore assume they're nice, on Twitter. So
Peter Cushing isn't in The Damned.
why are we watching this?
Why are we?
It's not a good start.
I'm sure I had a good reason.
The children are fighting again. So, can I just say, before we move on any further, Liz, your quiz mastering of late.
Yes?
Yes, there are two very good examples. One of too much organisation and basically you put everyone on Verity completely on edge.
Did
because, yeah, well, you could hear this.
I don't remember
you
this.
You could hear this because they'd experienced your previous quiz where you were making it up as you went along and the scoring system, and they were so terrified that they spent the entire quiz going, we're waiting for the punchline, and then it finished. So,
I
is there
see you've
another
got into
punchline
some
coming?
propaganda from my fellow podcast members who were under the impression, because there was some slight confusion at the start of a previous quiz, that I made up the rules as I went along. As my own sister can testify, I went through it with her, what I was going to do, and if she thought it was a nice plan. She thought it was a horrible plan, so I did it anyway.
You did it anyway.
And I did come up with the exciting secret rules beforehand, and then they decided to pretend that I hadn't, because they didn't like how they weren't getting any questions right, which isn't my fault. Maybe they should just watch more Doctor Who.
I think
you've got a valid point there.
I think I've worked out the secret message that last quiz conveyed.
Yes.
It took me quite a while, but it's like the search for the golden hair across the British countryside. The questions were surreal. There was a certain David Lynchian atmosphere to the whole thing. There ought to have been the music from Twin Peaks playing underneath it as the tension gradually rose and rose.
That anyone has ever done, the last one. It was beautiful.
If you'd done that one,
Yes.
and not the first one, none of your contestants would have been waiting for it to go horribly strange.
I'm fine, they're all lovely quizzes.
No, it's
Kind, considerate. I don't feel like I'm in competition with the players.
It's almost as if they were expecting you to go, right, now I know you've got your marks at the end, but I was marking you on something else, and you were about to go, I was marking you on how many times you said the word treadmill, and here's your actual marks.
That's an
That's a good
interesting idea. I
idea.
should write that one
Yes,
down.
for example, how many times you say time monster, and
Again, another excellent idea.
so, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but that is actually what I thought was going on. And I was
I
stood there
might steal these for next time.
listening on.
Fingers crossed. Just maybe say, don't listen to the Tin Dog podcast that I'm
It's
on.
all right.
They won't do
Very
it.
few people do.
You have shared what your terrifying plan for the next quiz is, and I don't think it's ethical. I don't think.
But also, there could be a double bluff where they do hear this and they think, no, she couldn't possibly do it. Then you do it anyway. It's
Yeah.
just too evil. So, congratulations on having the best, scariest quiz that people will.
Loveliest.
Loveliest.
Loveliest
That's the
quiz.
word I was looking for. Loveliest quiz in the world. Go on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I try my best. That's my best qualities, I feel it shows.
Now, at the beginning of the Verity podcast, you always have a lovely thing that everyone's had. And thank you so much. A few weeks ago, somebody mentioned geek myths. But you, because you're so ridiculously humble, you didn't bother mentioning your Blake 7 writing on the programme. It's as if you didn't want anybody knowing. You got this, there was a book out, your short story was in it, you've done some work for Big Finish.
But
it
we're
was
a
released.
Doctor Who podcast.
Yeah, it's still something you could be happy about.
Yeah, but it's not related to Doctor Who, and
Blake 7 is the most liked Doctor Who programme in the world.
it's I get very what's the right word? Not angry. I feel other people are cheating when either they use Mad Libs, that means Erica, or they say a thing that isn't Doctor Who connected. It's like, what's the point then? They could listen to another podcast about general happy things or something. We're here to talk about Doctor Who, and yeah, so it's not Doctor Who.
Just keeping everyone on target. That's all you will do.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll talk about Doctor Who things.
So basically, we need you to do more Doctor Who for Big Finish, and then you're more than willing to talk about it.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, is it? You're going to do Doctor Who and wait for somebody else to mention it because you'll be sitting there going, well, I might have written a story, but that's somebody else's.
Yeah. Yes, it's not my fault. It's
It's the which would go, well, if no one else is going to mention it, I will.
So are you actually working on anything at the moment that you're not going to mention?
Yes.
Excellent. And you, Paul? Are you talking?
Well, I have a small happy thing,
You do?
but enough about my physique.
So you're guessing working on many things that you're also not going to be able to talk about.
Many things. I mean, it's a really good place at the moment. I'm awaiting about 10 different possibilities, any one of which, if it actually happens, will be fairly life-changing. So the decision to only do my own characters seems to have been a useful one for me.
Right. So it wasn't your way of going, right, I'm not playing with Doctor Who anymore and making the world go, well, we can convince them otherwise. and throwing things at you.
Actually, no, I have been running really hard in the other direction. Apart from this one thing that's left, which I wrote 4 years ago and still hasn't come out. And so all my efforts to come to a nice, smooth little curlicue at the end and end exactly where I want to will be for naught.
You can't leave Doctor Who any more than Doctor Who can leave you alone.
Really, Doctor Who has often left me alone. I mean, sometimes I run a few steps and look back over my shoulder and go, I'm running. Chase me, but it fails to chase me.
So once Hammer's finished, do you have anything else lined up?
It's quite a long
No,
way,
but
isn't it?
5 years. I am sure by that point I'll just be glad to find another podcast and someone else to talk to on a regular basis.
Well, I might not last the distance. I might decide that I quite like disliking certain movies and don't want my opinion changed across the course of an hour.
No, you wouldn't.
Yes, I will.
No, you wouldn't.
I will.
I don't think you will.
Well,
I think we've established the entire podcast is going to keep going just on that.
Sorry.
So, on the subject of other podcasts, your Blake 7 seems to have ceased for a moment. Or just, is it on hiatus?
Yes, it's on
I used the H word
hiatus.
in a Doctor Who convention. I apologise.
Yes, it's obviously on hiatus. Thank you.
Well,
I
thank you
appreciate
very much
it.
for being here.
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.